I'm going to hand over to our host. She goes by the name of Fats. Can we give her a round of applause, please? Here you go, lovely.
Hi guys, how you feeling today? Hi everyone, welcome to Access All Areas panel. How did you guys find the performance? Okay. So, today we have 6 panelists, amazing panelists from the industry, different areas, and they're here to share so many tips, so many advice, journeys, and as you guys know, our topic for today is mental health in the music industry, and I'm so happy we're having this conversation because this conversation is definitely needed. And right now, I'm just going to introduce the panelists. Okay, first up we have Vanessa Maria, DJ broadcast at Foundation FM and host at Resident Advisor, hosting a music and mental health related podcast and documentary series. Make some noise! Come on. We have Housepoet, who is a DJ, producer, and sound engineer, and creative director. Let's go, make some noise. We also have Richie Brave, who is a presenter, broadcaster, and writer. He is a host of BBC One Extra Talks, exploring the lived experiences of Black people across the UK. Make some noise. And we also have, there's a whole lot going on today. We have Natalie Witts-Kilshaw, who is a live theatre and music writer official at Music Union. Can we make some noise? We also have Franchesca, who is a therapist and a specialist in racial trauma and mental health music and entertainment, and a songwriter as well. Make some noise. Lastly, we have Natasha Hendry, who's a music educator, researcher, and speaker, and vocal trainer and social activist. Can we make some noise? But anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining me, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you guys. I know you guys can share so much, but before we get into everything, how are you guys feeling? How are you guys really feeling? Like, we're good? Yes? Love that, love that. So, obviously, I've introduced you guys, but can you guys give us a little bit of a summary about your roles, what you actually do? Just short and sweet, starting with Vanessa. Hey, everyone. Oh, is it on? I'm like, should I just use my voice? Oh, is it on? Oh, okay, hold on. Push the red button. Oh, button.
1 2 1 2. Woo!
Yes.
Hey, it's lovely to meet everyone. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm a DJ, a broadcaster, and I also work within music and mental health. I have a background in mental health. I used to be a representative at the University of Bristol, and then I was really burnt out, so I thought, let me just be a DJ. And then I was like, oh, this is a little bit fickle, so let me try and, merge the two areas together. So that's kind of like a short summary. And as Fats was saying, I work with Resident Advisor as well within the dance space, so dance music, looking at how we can create a more equitable, more inclusive, basically industry for Black and brown artists in that area. It's extremely elite, and anyone who's ever been to big major dance music festivals knows that it's not very inclusive and lineups are very white. So I work a lot in that area and incorporate mental health and well-being in that space.
Hi everyone, I'm the Housepoet. I'm a deaf DJ, so I'm deaf. I DJ, I mentor deaf people, I teach deaf people. I'm a sound engineer, I come from the hearing side. In the last year, I had an operation. I was made permanently deaf, so I'm transitioning into the side of the deaf people. I'm working with a company called Deaf Rave. I'm teaching deaf DJs how to DJ through visuals and through a backpack called Wuja that sends vibrations to the body. That is just through vibrations of bass line. I'm now in the progress of creating an album through Bassline, not through the hearing. And yeah, I'm happy to be here and happy to be speaking for AAA seminars and Black Lives in Music. I recently done a report in Black Lives in Music on racism within the industry. I come from a mixed heritage background. My dad is Black Caribbean from Jamaica. My mum's English and white. So I understand racism on both sides of the industry and how it can implement to mental health. So really my duty here today is to speak about my mental health within the music industry, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be here amongst all of these peers and music individuals and professionals, and to everyone that's out here. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Franchesca. All of you look beautiful on this Monday. So it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you AAA for inviting me to speak. So I'm a cognitive behavioural therapist. I work for the NHS, and I primarily work with people who experience depression, anxiety disorders, but outside of that I specialise in racial trauma. So racism and trauma that's experienced mostly by Black and brown people and their lived experiences, and I try and help guide people in that journey, processing some of the trauma that they've been through, dealing with their day-to-day triggers. I think it's really important that music and mental health is spoken about, because there is a lack of support in the music industry when it comes to musicians, and actually musicians are actually more likely to experience mental health difficulties. So I think it's really great that we're shedding light on this, so thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Richie Brave, host of One Extra Talks on BBC Radio 1 Extra. It's a radio show that explores the experiences of Black people across the UK. Very important for me, because I think it's really important that people don't just consume our culture and our music and not have our experience. So for me, you are enjoying the fruits of our experience, and some of that is rooted in beauty, but of course some of that is rooted in struggle as well. And I don't say Black identity is specifically rooted in struggle, but a lot of the art that we have created, there is kind of a line that feeds through that, and our joy as well. So I think it's really important that people are understanding our direct experience. I guess two things. So previously a cognitive behavioural therapist myself, specialised in domestic abuse interventions and people who experience violent trauma. Also did sexual offending and all that kind of stuff. I did that for a very long time. I don't want to give away my age. But lastly, what I would say is I think this conversation is really important as someone who experienced a breakdown at 20 years of age as a result of losing my cousin through murder. And I've had anxiety and depression ever since, and it's something that's up and down, and it's something I probably manage on a daily basis. And I think it's really important that we're out here having those real conversations about it. Also, what I will say as well, I lost my sister last year, and that was the way grief affects me as, you know, kind of crept into that. But additionally, what I would say is my sister is someone who struggled with a mental health condition, and she wasn't managed properly by the system, and it resulted in her death, unfortunately. So for me, there are lots of dots that connect. So this isn't just a professional conversation for me. This is very much rooted in the heart, the spirit, and the personal. And I think it's really important that we have these conversations, because they're difficult, right? We're human beings. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Hi, my name is Natalie Witts-Kilshaw. As we said, I work for the Musicians Union, so I'm the Live Theatre and Music Writers Official, which is a very snappy title. So I do lots of work within the industry. I was a trombone player for 15 years before I started playing. Before I started at the union, so I did lots of touring and theatre and recording, and then decided I wanted to come and work for the union and do some of that stuff that's, you know, helping musicians and helping people with the struggles that I had during my career. But I also have a massive interest in mental health. I have OCD. I'm very open about that. I'm also a mental health first aider. So if anybody's heard of music support, please go and Google them. If you do anything after this, go and Google them. They train mental health first aiders, and I've done it 3 times now, and it's a huge part of my life. It's something that I use with members. It's something I use in my day-to-day. It's something I use with my family, my friends. So yeah, I'm really interested and really happy to be invited to be here, because I really can't wait to hear what everyone's going to say. And yeah, it's a safe space. That's all I'm going to say. It feels like a really nice, you're such a lovely audience. So yeah, it sounds like we're all going to have a very nice and open conversation in this safe space. So yeah, it's great.
Okay, I will be brief so we can get onto the juicy stuff and the conversations. But yeah, I'm Natasha, and I suppose in some ways I've been on both sides of looking at the music industry and the environment of it for over 20 years. I won't give my age away either. I was a singer, worked as a backing singer in the pop music industry, and for over a decade worked as the touring artist with a dance band, so I can testify to what Vanessa said about how white those festivals and spaces and experiences are. And I think for me, as an artist and a singer myself, my music and songwriting was always my superpower, and was the way that I did activism and spoke about the things I wanted to talk about. And as was mentioned, I also vocal coach artists as well as newcomers to the music industry, and really saw in that space of teaching people vocal technique that it was also became a bit of a mentoring situation, and really saw how much that psychology is a big part of what we do as performers. And I think I experienced it personally and saw that with the people that I worked with. And actually, when I had my first child, I, for obvious reasons perhaps, didn't want to be touring anymore and going everywhere, and be a bit more rooted, and thought about maybe getting a proper grown-up job and stop messing around being this singer. And so I retrained in psychology, and just found that I really loved it, and stumbled across, really, because music is my world and music people are my people. I ended up studying a singing group as part of my dissertation, and found this whole field called music psychology, which I didn't even know existed. And I was like, okay, this sounds like the next step for me. I don't have to have a complete departure from music. I can put psychology and music together. So unlike how I'm often introduced, I'm not a psychotherapist at all. It's a very different thing, and we have qualified people here that do that. But what I am doing is research psychology, and really for me this has been a new superpower that I've found, that by really looking at and talking about and finding and elevating the lived experiences of people. You know, people want to know numbers and they want to know stats. Unfortunately, our lived experiences apparently are not enough to change some policies, and they do want to really see robust research. So you've got to show people where the issues are, and then look at evidence-based solutions to them. And so for me, that's an area I've moved into. I did some research I did a master's in music psychology that centered on performance, education, and well-being, and was really horrified to find, going back to education as a mature student, that many of the barriers I faced in music education as a mixed race teenager, i.e. you just don't belong here, but music's my life at home, but when you go to school, what's this music education seemed very, very different, and lots of barriers. And I was experiencing the same thing as an adult, and just thought, I've got to do something about this. This needs to change. I don't want my children and the next generations to keep feeling these barriers. And so really out of necessity, I was like, I'm going to have to do a PhD. I never in a million years thought I would do something like that. So I managed to get a scholarship, and I'm currently doing a PhD, which is looking to create a framework for a racially literate music education, which I really hope will make some real world difference and change some policy. And we'll get into it, I hope, but the mental health picture is a really big part of that, because it's not just about not engaging. The barriers that our young people, our young black people are experiencing in education is having a real adverse psychological effect on them. And that is something that we need to illuminate a bit more as well.
world, social media has become very huge in this generation, and studies have indicated that social media has impact in mental health. Vanessa, I really want to touch on, one thing I admire about you is you're so transparent with your followers about your journey, your journey as a DJ. And one of the things that you touched on your social media last year, you went through a lot when it comes to your journey as a DJ, and you nearly quit last year. What are some of the challenges that you went through, and how did you overcome them?
I think that social media is a tool, and I think for a long time I was really afraid to use it. And I remember being in therapy last year, and I spoke to my therapist, and I was like, I'm so anxious to open the Instagram app, which is kind of like career suicide if you're a DJ trying to get bookings, because I literally wouldn't post the posters. I was just so I was just afraid. And my therapist was like, okay, let's try some exposure therapy. So just doing a story every day, and just getting used to just putting yourself out there and that kind of thing. So that made me sort of heal my relationship with social media. I think at the time I was also in a dark place. I was extremely depressed, and I was very anxious. I had loads of stuff going on, major heartbreak that someone didn't warn me that could actually ruin your life, which was insane. So there was, and health conditions and that kind of stuff. So at that point, the challenge for me as a DJ was actually having the confidence to show up for myself in the online space and in real life. And once I found the confidence to stand and find my voice and understand what I wanted to say, what I wanted to be known for, what my sound was as a selector, I think it gave me the confidence to also be transparent about my journey, because I realized a lot of people were just marketing themselves as an artist, but there was a lot of smoke and mirrors that I felt that I was seeing. I was like, okay, so now you've got this book, but how did that happen? How are you making money? Because I know all the DJs are getting £50 an hour at Soho House, so what is going on? How are you affording this drip? How are you flying out? So I kind of started thinking, why is no one talking about how much money they make? So I made a TikTok about how much money I make and what I got for bookings, and how I diversified my income. And then I started realizing people were all feeling the same as I was. So I decided that I was gonna just talk about my experience with depression, and loads of people sort of connected with that. So for me, the challenge was understanding myself, finding the confidence to I guess express how I felt, and then be open enough to share that with the people around me, and then have the confidence to share that with strangers.
I love that. And it's funny because when you look at social media, people only see the glitz and glam, but they don't really know what goes on behind closed doors, which is why it kind of messes up especially with the young people as well. So, my question to you all, what advice do you guys have for artists, especially up-and-coming artists or young people that want to get into the industry or are in the industry, but they're going through so much with their mental health and just dealing with social media, because, of course, that's their way, one of the things that they want to market themselves on social media?
Yeah, I would say, like Vanessa said, social media has its goodness and badness. The goodness is there for artists to connect and to be able to portray what their talents are and how to put it in there. But what we have with social media is that there's so many different influxes of different views. So the view that you're necessarily getting back to you is nothing to do with your music, which can cause a hindrance to how you progress. I think with social media, I will say it now, yeah, social media is fake. Yeah, it's fake. People put stuff on social media. I can go outside now and take pictures outside a great venue and say, I'm here. I've tagged being in France, being here. My friend has supported me through the music industry and said, yeah, we're in New York or we're here. and we're there, and I've walked down the road and seen people come up to me and saying, "How was Miami?" And I'm like, "What have you said?" So he's definitely said that we was in Miami, but I think social media can have so much influences depending on how you use it. So you have to, I say for me, in the journey of how it is believe in your journey. Your journey is not no one else's journey. So if someone's blowing up before you, don't take it to heart. Your time will come. I'm a believer and I'm a God person, and it says what will come for you will come at the time that's right. But within this music industry, you just have to have that belief. If you want to be within music and do this, you're always going to be at the place where you need to be, and it will always come. Coming from, let's talk about racism within music and how it affects you. I come from, look at me, I look white, I got black features, the nose, the lips, all of these things. I've been amongst white people and suffered racism. I've been amongst black people and heard the same thing back. So regardless if it's white, black, Asian, wherever it is, there's prejudice amongst everyone in certain circumstances. And I think that has got to do with people not elevating each other and not elevating the journey that you're in. So it's easy to be complacent, and it's easy to worry about, why am I doing not better than the next person? Everyone wants you to do better, but they never want you to do better than them. And this is, I think, what is come within this industry that is so fickle that, that you can think you're there and you're not there. You can talk to the right people and then people talk behind your back. So in this circumstances, mental health can break you. It can cause you to a point of suicide. I've sat on buildings ready to jump off buildings, I've had music and thought, I'm here, but I'm not here. So mental health within this music industry is a big thing. And like you were saying, how you lost your friend. I've grown up with people and, seen people murdered and lose their life and still trying to maintain. And my dad was in jail for growing up as a youngster. So I went to all the prisons, Brixton, Wandsworth, the Scrubs. I went everywhere. And while my dad was in jail and split up with my mum, my stepfather was a Rasta, and we had a studio in the house, and he created music, and he taught me about the racism within this industry. I got pictures with him saying, I want locks, and he's put the locks over my head and took the pictures, and I suffered within both realms, you understand? So even coming back, like this weekend I was at an event which my friend put on that incorporates sound systems, like the regeneration of sound systems, Don Sinclair. He put a thing on there, and as I was walking past, I had someone tap me on the shoulder and say, pick up that thing from the floor. And I said, that wasn't mine. But they see this band around my head. They see this disabled person walking, and they see this, in fact, a white person within this environment, and subjecting me to some racial discrimination. And it happens in every kind of environment. But I think the most important thing within this environment is that you have your own journey, and your own journey is not no one else's. And you're going to go through trials and tribulations, and you're going to be up and down. But I think the main thing in this industry is to know that nothing's going to work your way. You have to kick down the doors, put down the barriers, walk through the talks of people saying you're not worth it. You're not welcome in here, because this is what we do as black artists. This is what we deal with in this industry. You know, they got the Matrix up there. Do you know about the Matrix? So the Matrix is up there to deal with black artists. Anyone that's putting stuff on YouTube and putting stuff in this social media side of it is being subjected to points and tick boxes to say whether this is supposed to be up there. So already it's a, like a put my foot on you and put you down here. So all I can say is really within social media, use it to your abilities and use it for what it's there for. It's a social tool. It's not a friend tool. You don't have no friends within this thing, because as soon as you put something up that is positive about music, no one likes it. No one says well done. But put a thing up there about some trouble that you had, or your brethren got murdered, or someone got arrested, and I bet you get many likes.
That's interesting, because I think Richie has something to say, haven't you?
Oh, sorry, I talk too much.
I think he has something to say. I saw you shaking your head a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I like, maybe outside of music, like not having any friends. Like for me, I've built the greatest network through social media. People who I can call my friends now, and people who support me. I don't even use the term followers, because I didn't come into this industry through the industry. I come up through community. I was a community organizer, all of that. So for me, these are my community that I interact with. And I think from a social media perspective, it's knowing what you want it for. So like, I use it as a tool, but I also use it to run my mat. Like, I'm known for that, like a lot. Like, I was getting dragged all last weekend by racists. They called the BBC, tried to get me out of my job. They told me I'm a danger to British society. They called me a disgusting darkie, which was wild though, because I haven't been called a darkie since the 90s. You're like, wow, like very original. But basically I sent out a tweet and I said, you racist rats, sicken me, something along those lines. If it wasn't for the Windrush generation, some of your family members would be dead, you unscrupulous hogs. So basically, they got me. I'm a South Londoner, innit? They got me on the unscrupulous hogs. But like, what I'm saying is, like, all jokes aside, understand what you're using it for. So the block button is your friend. Block dickheads, People who try and take you off your stride and remove from your spirit and pull away from you. And I think we don't always acknowledge that art is a very personal thing. When you're putting music out there, those songs, those productions, that songwriting, that's your baby, People are chatting about your baby mad. So and not everyone's gonna like what you do, but I think it's understanding that the space that you're within. So in order to safeguard yourself, I hear what you're saying on the likes. The likes aren't always reflective of your talent. And even like the interactions that you get aren't always reflective of your talent. And Cleo Soul has been spoken about quite often here. Cleo Soul's been out here since 2007, Like, I was a funky house raver. She's been out here. Her talent is immeasurable. But it took she is kind of testament to perseverance and talent. It wasn't about clicks. It wasn't about likes. Her time came, So for me, the only advice I would give is social media, you can use a knife to cut bread to feed your family, or you can use a knife to stab someone, right? Which is a brutal example. It's the same tool, it's used in two totally different ways. So the advice I will give, I don't want to take up too much time when I pass this on, but is understanding what you use social media for. How does this fit in with your plan? And for some people is, actually social media for me is a release. So once I've made my music, I'm gonna use social media just to have a laugh and interact with people and give an insight into my daily life and who I am. Because everyone likes a package, right? It's not just about the music, it's about the whole thing that sits around it. For other people, they're like, social media, I find it overwhelming, I find it difficult, and it triggers negative mental health. So I'm gonna give it to somebody else to manage, and I'm going to use my social media specifically just to showcase the things that I'm doing. So I don't think there's no one size fits all answer. I think we are all individuals, and when it comes to safeguarding our mental health, we need to do that in ways that fit us. We all have individual palettes when it comes to the things that we like to taste, eat, drink. It's very the same thing with social media. People calling me a darkie, I don't business. Catch me on road, the camera's running. That's what I'm saying. No, for real, that's what I'm about. Like, people think I'm love and light. I'm not that, you know. You move mad to me in person, it's a whole different thing. I'm from New Cross, Blueborough. I got to go too, you know, it's about, and I'm Guyanese on top of that.
Specific.
Listen, that's what I'm about. But it's understanding what works for you, right? And one last thing I'll say before I pass it on, find your tribe, you know? Find your tribe on social media. For me, it's about finding people who sit alongside me and believe in the same things that I believe in. Me, I'm not about racism, homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, none of that. That doesn't run in my circles. And social media was a way for me to find groups that were like me, that don't run with them either. So again, lastly, what I say, it's a tool for good and it's also a tool for bad. It's just finding out how it works for you and your own mental health.
Love that. Franchesca, did you have anything to say? Franchesca. Sorry.
I completely agree with what everyone said so far. So in what I do, I see a lot of young people, and social media is one of the main triggers. And it's interesting because social media has been good in terms of shedding a lot of light on mental health and bringing it to people's awareness. But from another perspective, people have used it as a tool to diagnose themselves. And actually, sometimes people will hear of certain mental health conditions or disorders, and they will almost shapeshift into what they're hearing because it's so prevalent, it's so in our faces. And I would advise anyone here, if you are experiencing any symptoms of mental health, please go and see your GP and go and speak to someone who is a professional, because I think it can be quite unhelpful when we self-diagnose ourselves based on social media and what we hear. I always say to my clients, when it comes to social media, with social media, it's compare and despair, that's a thing. So you're comparing and you're despairing. And a lot of it is to do with how you're interpreting things and how you're internalizing it and how you're almost internalizing it, and that's a representation of yourself. So for example, you see a peer, maybe you had the same journey and they're excelling. You're not, you're comparing your experience to theirs, and because of that, you're experiencing despair. You have to separate yourself, and I think it's about knowing what season you're in. If you're in a season and your mental health is not the best, then maybe it's time to take a digital detox, and that's completely fine. Like what Richie said, you might want to hand your social media over to someone else and just say, can you manage this for a minute? Because obviously, as musicians, you do need to be present. That is a thing. But it's important to recognize that if you're not present and okay within yourself, the music's secondary. You need to be okay first and foremost. So that's what I would say. To also answer the first part of the question that you asked, coming back to the social media question, imposter syndrome as well. That's a very big thing. People feel like they shouldn't be where they are, or like they're intruding into a certain space, and that's not the case. If you're supposed to be in a space, you're supposed to be in a space. There are no rules, there are no regulations. You have every right to be in the spaces that you are, and you can show up as your authentic self. So I think it's really important to remind yourself of that, but also to try and separate yourself from the music. I know it's really difficult because, like Richie said, your music is a reflection of you. It's your child. It's an extension of you. And like Erykah Badu said, I'm sensitive about my shit, right? But so that's a thing. But what people do is, if people reject the music, people say, okay, you're rejecting me. If people don't like the music, you don't like me. That's not the case. Sometimes that just might not be that person's taste in music, and that's completely fine. Maybe someone likes this track, but they didn't really feel a next track, and that's okay. So just because maybe the numbers are not doing well, it doesn't mean that you're a failure. So I think it's really important to try and separate your identity from the music, and you can do that by doing things outside of the music. I think it's really important to take breaks from the music industry because it's a lot, it's very overwhelming. And so that sometimes being around people that you love, like your friends and family, like taking breaks outside of the music industry where possible. And coming back to your question about what can young people do, what was the first part of that?
What tips do you have for young people? What tips do you have for young people? Because obviously you work with a lot of young people. What tips do you have for young people when it comes to like the ones that want to get into the industry or like dealing with social media, and like dealing with a lot with their mental health?
Yeah. So, tips for young people. I think first and foremost, make sure that you have a good support system, and that can be anyone, a family member, a friend, but somebody that you feel that you can actually speak to, somebody that you feel safe with. I think that's really important. Sometimes people don't actually feel safe around, sometimes even people in the music industry or like their managers. Sometimes there's a lot of pressure. So it's important that you have a safe space to speak out, and when it is getting too much, that you're able to say things, because in music and entertainment, there's the show must go on. And so what people do is they push and push and push and push and push, and then they burn out. And that's how people have breakdowns. And it's really important that once you recognize that you're not coping, that you speak to someone. I always say, as a therapist, speak to your GP and ask to be, if you want to see someone, try and see someone, and always advocate for yourself, because in terms of Black people, unfortunately, we are more likely to be prescribed medication as opposed to be referred to therapy and compared to our white counterparts. So if you do speak to your GP, advocate for yourself. You are entitled to free therapy, and have that safe space where you can speak to somebody actually outside of your family and friends. Sometimes people feel like a burden, and sometimes people have things that they feel they can't speak to with their family and friends because they are the trigger. So, it's really... So yeah, you can't heal in the place that made you sick. So you need to recognize that as well. And sometimes you need to remove yourself, not physically but mentally, and have that safe space where you have, an hour a week where you can speak freely and express what's happening for you and get some guidance from a mental health professional, not Google, not unsolicited advice or the forums or social media, but from someone that's trained.
Can I add to that quickly?
Quickly.
I just want to add to that. For the young professionals as well, schedule yourself some time to do this. Don't do it every day. Schedule yourself some time. So say Wednesday between 6 and 8, that's when I'm going to do my post. Or the day before, I know what I'm going to do. So you've got a schedule. Because if you schedule it, then you're not going to be on it all the time. So schedule it, put it out there, wait for the response, ingest that, evaluate, and then come back from that.
Great advice. I totally agree as well.
Sorry, another practical tip is if you feel like your social media feed is a trigger for you, clear it out.
Amazing tips, guys. Amazing tips. Natalie, yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry, I thought we were going to move on. So I think social media, I'm terrible at it. So I'm not going to sit here and say you should use it. Well, I am going to sit here from my industry head on. I am going to say, unfortunately, it's a necessary evil. You kind of do need it. But I'm not going to go over what everybody else has said because I completely agree. I think there's different ways of managing it. You need to think about what it means to you and what it means to you as a person, what it means to you as an artist, where you want to go. What I will say, without sounding too conspiracy theorist, that they are set up so that we compare ourselves to others. So I think that you just need to bear that in mind. Don't despair small beginnings. It's like we've talked about it before. But the comparison to going, well, this person's done this person's done that. Everybody is on their own journey at their own pace, and you cannot rush it. Just sort of doing things for likes. Is it Jerry Lovin? Who's the guy that into records? Anyway, he was saying I was watching an interview with Pharrell Williams the other day, and he was saying that the guy Interscope Records, whatever his guy is, Jerry or Jimmy, was saying that it's why you're getting into music. Are you getting into music just to be really cool? Is it because it's cool? Obviously this is said much better than I'm about to say it. Or is it for something else? Are you trying to speak to your own truth? Do you want to get stuff out of you? Because if it's just for the cool stuff, then it's not going to last. You're going to burn out. It's going to burn out. So it's really thinking about what that social media is going to do for you as a person, because you are a person at the very first and foremost. You are not an artist. You are a person with feelings, with emotions, with needs that need to be met. So I think it's about making sure that they are meeting those needs, and as everything that's been said, the detoxing and everything. But yeah, it's just making sure you're aware that you control your feed as well. You don't have to follow people that make you angry. You don't have to do that. No one's making you do that. Block them. As you were saying, block is, I'm not on it very often because I'm terrible at it. It also puts me in a very horrible space immediately. My algorithms are basically political, and we were talking about earlier, and cat memes. So the cat stuff is great. I have two. I have work and I have a personal one. My personal one is just cats. And then my work one is just because I work for a union. And I actually forgot to say what we will do, but I will come on to that in a minute because I'm terrible at self-promotion. But the other one is just political, and I really struggle on the political one because it makes me so angry. And I'm there the whole time, so I do have to make sure I'm really mindfully on it and not just going scroll, 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 scroll. So I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Amazing. Thank you.
No, if you want to move on, I think there's been some really good advice, but just a very small thing that I would add is just to say that one of the things that comes up in the research on mental health in the music industry is that one sort of, I suppose, lesser talked about or identified stressor is artists' definition of success. And I think we have a bit of a lack of understanding and dialogue around that, but it brings a lot of extra mental pressure, and I think social media feeds into that. You have to really think about what do you define as success for yourself. And if it is about how many clicks and likes you've got, or what this person has said about your music video, and you are basing success on those things, then you probably will feel a failure a lot of the time. And I think sometimes we can miss, actually, when we've had a win and celebrating ourselves and see how far we've come and celebrate what we've done, because we have this measure of success that is unrealistic and actually doesn't really line up with our values. And I think a really healthy thing to do is think, well, what is really important to me? What's my story? Where have I come from? Why did I get into music initially? And maybe you've got something to say. Maybe it was because your dad was in a band. Maybe it's because music and writing songs was a way that you could just express yourself. And then you can look back and think, I've actually done all of those things. And this, my baby, this thing I've created has come from me. And that's a win and to be celebrated. So just to say, really think about what your definitions of success are. Don't miss the things that are achievements. If we do base it on just solely what social media is telling us, we can really feel like failures very quickly, and that can really affect your mental health.
Love that, love that. So obviously we spoke on, mental health and social media because it plays a big part. I wanted to ask you, Natasha, obviously, artists, a lot of them, they're independent, some are signed to labels. Do you think labels should draft mental health support into their contracts, into artists' contracts?
100%.
Yeah.
And it's not just labels, managers. I think we look at the business side of it. Lawyers, every single aspect of the industry needs to be considering mental health, because you can't separate it. And we can't separate ourselves from our identity or our issues any more can we from our art. And it's part of us, it's all of one thing. And I think we fortunately are having lived experience research that's coming through to show that there is a huge mental health problem in the music industry, and it's getting to the point now where it can't be ignored, and there's enough voices, fortunately, that are talking about it, but there's still some more that needs to be done. And I think it needs to start to move on from a conversation now and to start to really have meaningful support. And that needs to be more than lip service, and it needs to be more than strap lines and companies saying we think it's important. They need to be trying to say, well, what are you actually doing about that in real terms? How are you supporting artists? Are you really aware of the nuances within mental health that affect people, and doing specific interventions and strategies to help with those things? So I think we need to hold them accountable, actually. And there's some really good organisations that are starting to do that, and some really good individuals. But it needs to be more than just words. Yeah. And I think having, companies actually doing something and funding things as well. It's all well to talk about it. As soon as any money needs to be exchanged, you often see things fall down. So yes, is a short answer.
Yeah, it's very interesting because a lot of the times we see a lot of these artists go off on social media and they're talking about how they're stressed, tired from touring, and they're being overworked. And the fact that it is very vital that they should put mental health support in their contracts, because a lot of them are actually like, obviously on social media they look happy, but behind closed doors you can just tell like it affects them really. But yeah, definitely. So another thing that I wanted to talk about, do you think racism in the music industry is a contributing factor in mental health of people of color? This is for everyone to share what are their thoughts.
I will say on a sense of both ways. So, for instance, I can have my hair out like this, and have my hood up, and I come from the black industry. I can shave my hair off and shave my beard off, and you'd think I'm white, So I come from a generation where it's been incorporated to me on a systematic system that I've seen the racism like straight, where people have said black this, black that, and I'm like, I've got to stand back a bit, because I'm trying to be in this industry, and now I'm in this industry, but if I speak up, what happens to me? I get kicked down out the door. I think systematically within this industry, in order to progress, we need to incorporate all the different values of where life comes from. So I'm coming from a place where I'm light-skinned. I try, I'll be there, I'll be this. But as an example, for instance, I do a lot of stuff in Ministry of Sound in London. And then I can have an event on, which is predominantly white people. And everything goes right. Riders in bottles, this and that. And then I can do another event, which is predominantly black people, black artists. And then the bottles get taken away. Everything has to be served in plastic cups. There's gonna be some kind of trouble here. And recently, like, it's very, how can I say, it's very deterring you from actually wanting to do music. Because, you create something, and I've just created an event to do on a boat on the Thames. But now I'm dealing with Thames and Metropolitan Police. So all of a sudden they've seen the flyers come out now. So they've seen black faces on the flyers. There's a mix on the flyer, don't get me wrong, but because of they've seen the black faces on the flyer, now been subjected to a Metropolitan Police subject where I've got to give every single artist's name. I've got to put that onto the forefront. And it's disheartening in a sense, where we live in a society where we're supposed to be free and we're supposed to be inclusive to everyone. So I think in a personal stance of where things go, we need to really embrace mental health in the music industry, because it affects a lot of people. I didn't want to come out to no raves because I saw my friend get his throat slit open in a club and die in front of me, and then play music at an event, and then play music at his funeral. So for me to step back into the music industry and go back into that club situation, it's been hard with anxiety and depression. So, you have to build networks around you, and you have to speak to people that are your friends, your family, for them to, to encourage and also give you that platform and that stepping stone to say, you know what, I deserve to be here for my own, my own input into this thing. And it's very hard. Like I'm in the mix between all of it. But one thing I say is that, like I always come back to the thing of this, is that your journey is your journey. It's no one else's, you know. Don't get red eye when you see someone else doing better than you, because you're not in it for the music. You understand what I'm saying? So you have to be here in a place where you know that you're valuable to this industry, and then also by having many more people that's valuable within this industry. I'm talking about ethnic minorities, in order to build this and like quash this, you know, this stigma. You know, my event just got cancelled because they asked me in the email, are there chatters or there rappers on this boat? So what am I going to do now? Just cut off all the MCs that are on this event? And I'm thinking, like, how are you looking at the history of music? So we've got garage music, we've got this, we've got grime, and people chat over music. So what, can I not play this music now on a boat? So what are you discriminating against? Is it because of my color? Is it because of disability? And what is it? So we say there's a systematic thing within this industry that needs to be overturned. And it's because we've got everyone here that sits here and, you know, believes in where we're trying to go with this, can take us to the next level of where we need to be. And it's a pleasure to actually be in part of this, to actually speak about this, because no one ever heard my story. You understand? I got missed by black and white. You understand? So to be able to be here and come through this and now sit here as a deaf person, I can't hear you. I listen out of this thing here, cochlear implant. All the music goes into here, and I plug into the mixer, and I'll mix off vibrations. But it's now being recognized by deaf people, and because my CEO on the deaf thing, he's suffered all this racism within the industry. He's suffered disabilities within the racism industry, but he's now been able to show people that we come from a place where we know about music. You know, the ancestors created this music, and this is what we, you know, keep pushing out there. So for people to be judgmental and to say, you know, you shouldn't be part of this is a myth. And things like this, and to see all the people here to come together and speak about this stuff, will uplift the music industry, uplift Black lives in music, and uplift everything. And I know I skipped past the question, but I just want to say thank you, and it's an honor to be able to sit here and actually speak as a person from the mixed heritage, coming from Kingston, Jamaica, and being able to speak here and say what needs to be done in order to uplift this. And as a collective, we need to keep coming together in order to inspire all of these young artists. Because I'm 45, I've done my time. I don't need to be here, you know. But to work with these artists and these artists that are singing and performing, and to see where their levels are going to take it to, is you know, is so great. And you know, you have to support it, and you have to keep believing that regardless of the racism, regardless of the prejudice and the, you know, step my foot on you, you can't go nowhere. We as a collective can beat racism, and we can incorporate and inspire people in mental health in the music industry to give back. Sorry. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, fine. What I went to, like, in terms of the question, so if I got you right, you asked, does racism have an impact on mental health and people in the music industry? You can't separate yourself out of the structures of society. So if you look at how white supremacy shows up in Britain, structural racism, the fact that people of color have to navigate that on an everyday basis before you've even come into the industry. Schooling was spoken about a bit earlier on. It affects the way that people are policed. It affects people when it comes to mental health services. We are more likely to be given medicine as opposed to talking therapies. All of this stuff exists within the ecosystem, right? So when you go into the music industry and you're suddenly under the microscope, you're dealing with all of these things that exist on top. So the question really is, for me, like, can the music industry remove you from your experiences of racism? Quite often it can't. It's an extension of what you experience in society. So for me, I guess the bottom line or the bottom answer to this question is like absolutely yes. If it's affecting you in society, quite often it's going to be reflected in your art and it's going to be reflected in the space that you're in. But all of a sudden, being a musician doesn't automatically stop you from being black or a person of color and experiencing the racism that exists in society and that is embedded in society. So if you are experiencing that in your everyday life, you're going to experience that when you move into the music industry, because we are whole people.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, you moving on? Yeah. No, just wanted to say alongside that I think you're absolutely right, that for me it's as simple as racism is a mental health problem, and I think it's often not billed as that. It's billed as a societal problem, but it absolutely is, and it needs to be on the agenda in mental health discussions. Fortunately, as like research and studies and medicine moves on, we have things to add to our lived experiences, to what we know. And more recently, studies involving neuroscience has shown that structural racism actually has an effect on brain circuits. And I suppose what they are calling it is a weathering, so an experience of things like microaggressions over a period of time are having an effect on the brain's response to threat. And the situation is that we end up hyper-vigilant to threat the whole time, and that has an impact directly on your mental health. So things like depression, panic attacks, PTSD are elevated in black people in particular, but it's also having an effect on physical health as well. So studies are showing that as a direct result of this hypervigilance that is related to structural racism, that you are having an increase in obesity, hypertension, and diabetes. And the studies have shown that this is not an effect of race, these issues, but actually it's an effect of the pressures that are put on racialized people in society. And we have to pay, it's really concerning, this information that we actually have evidence out. One study in the States showed that black Americans are twice as likely to be diagnosed with dementia. And we can't ignore anymore that racism just isn't an unfortunate thing that happens to some people in society, but is actually shortening the lives of black people. And so we do need to put it on the agenda a lot more. And I think you're right, we can't separate ourselves from it, but bringing it back and closer to the industry, there are specific things that are going on in the industry that are not helping that. And they are the things that we can do something about. There is a very toxic environment in the music industry, a real shut up and put up sort of mentality, and things like misogyny, bullying, and racism amongst that are things that go on all the time but aren't addressed. There haven't been enough mechanism to show people how to report these things. People haven't wanted to lose opportunities, and so there's been an environment of silence. So these are things that we can change. If we can change the environment and put mental health, racism included, on the agenda and point people to where they can be supported. All of this sounds very doom and gloom, and it's the reality of it. But what I will say, in all of those studies that I mentioned, the one mediating factor, the one thing that helped, was support. And they showed that by having support networks and being able to talk about the issues, to offload, to counteract the gaslighting that we often get, that racism doesn't exist, with understanding and validating people's experiences, all of those things were mitigating against all of the mental and physical health ailments. So it's important because yes, it's out there in society, but it's very rife in the music industry, and that's what all of us in the room can take it upon ourselves to call out and support each other to do something about.
Thank you so much. I really wanted to touch on Franchesca. What are your I wanted to ask on how do you feel about like racial trauma in the industry? Like, what do you think that it affects a lot of people when it comes to like people in the industry, especially artists in the industry, when it comes to like racial trauma as well, especially for like young people as well, like young artists as well? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I really think it just echoes everything that everyone's said already. You really can't separate the two. Just merely existing as a black and brown person is traumatic, unfortunately. And racial trauma is racism. It's a form of trauma. So PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, that is actually it's a diagnosed condition. It's in the DSM-5. So it's like a dictionary of mental health disorders. And unfortunately, this was written many, many years ago by white males. And so the only disorders that are recognized are those that are pertaining to, the global population, but not specific to black and brown people. But as years have gone on, we've come to find that racial trauma is a real thing. In terms of the symptoms of PTSD, hypervigilance, panicking, anxiety. So if you've experienced a traumatic incident and you're unable to process it as a memory and you're still reliving that unfortunate experience, it shows up in your everyday life, how it affects you, how you show up yourself, your ability to concentrate, engage with people, your relationships. It shows up at work, your physical health. The exact same thing happens with racial trauma. And the difference that actually is with when you experience a traumatic stressor or a traumatic incident, normally it's something that's happened in the past. And so it's a past experience, but it's still showing up. With racial trauma, it's showing up every single day, at work, just merely existing. If we talk about work, it might be different for different people, but for musicians, their workplace is the music industry. And so it shows up there. I know there's loads of accounts of black women who have sang songs and they don't want that particular person to actually be in the video. They get another artist, especially with dance as well. That happens a lot. You'd always think it's the person that's singing it. No, it's a black person somewhere. And so imagine how devastating that must. It's almost like instant rejection, isn't it? Just to kind of say you're not good enough for the world to see you, but you're good enough for us to use your vocals. So again, I think it just comes back to what Richie was saying. It shows up in every sphere of society, in the systems, and that filters down to the music industry. I think the thing with the music industry is that people in the music industry, in terms of research, says that they are 3 times likely to experience mental health conditions and disorders. And it makes sense because everything is heightened, everything's amplified. There's everyday rejection, there's everyday having to put yourself out there and be rejected, or having to experience stage fright, or having to explain who you are. Loads of factors that come through, but I don't want to take up too much time.
Thank you so much. So I really want to touch on, So one of the things that we touched on earlier, when it comes to mental health, there's, a stigma around mental health when it comes to men find it difficult to share what they're going through, how they're feeling, and just expressing how they feel. Richie, you did speak on grief, depression. What needs to change? What do you think needs to happen when it comes to that?
I think creating space. If I'm really, this safe space and all that. If I'm being really transparent, so my sister died the 24th of July last year. Today is actually the anniversary of my cousin's murder. And I had 2 weeks off. And I thought I just had to carry on. I was suicidal up until maybe 2 months ago. Didn't think I'd ever do it, but that's how I felt. I woke up having conversations with people, my friends laughing, and in my head thinking about ways that I could possibly take my own life. And I know that I wouldn't do it, but the fact that those thoughts are there and they're more intense than they've ever been in my life really says something. But being in this industry where you think somebody's hot on your toes and you always have to show up and the next best person could possibly be taking your place, there's this pressure to show up all of the time, right? And this stoic I can talk about being black and West Indian, this West Indian culture of stiff upper lip and not really talking about what you're going through. When I talk about space, and this isn't just the grief side, right? And the BBC were really great. My boss was really great in creating space for me. It was the pressure I was putting on myself. In December, my friend had to come and pick me up off the floor because my curtains were closed. I hadn't eaten in days. So having those communities around you, I think, are really important. But let me go back to the industry and when I talk about space. And this isn't just things like grief and depression. This is things like psychosis, right? So when an artist is going through some sort of psychosis, and I'm not going to mention any names, you may know some of the people I'm talking about, and it shows up online, it's entertaining. Look at this person acting crazy, mad. What they're saying, what she's saying, what he's saying is outrageous. And sometimes those people are saying outrageous things. But it's so interesting that we can understand the symptoms of depression and anxiety. But when it comes to psychosis, and when people have delusions of grandeur, or when their reality of the world is warped, but the system that they're living in is making money off of them, and everyone's bringing them onto their platforms because it's interesting, right? It's entertaining, it gets the clicks. Like you were talking about a bit earlier on, there's no safeguarding there. And there's an artist recently, you're all gonna know who I'm talking about, who said things that I don't agree with, but what I think is really interesting about that artist, if they've got their own platform and they're jumping on social media to say things, that's one thing. When you can see someone is clearly unwell, but because they are a superstar, you know you're gonna benefit from having that person on your platform because they're saying outrageous things, we really need to ask ourselves some questions around how we're safeguarding the mental health of other people. So I don't think this is just a personal responsibility we have to ourselves and how we safeguard ourselves and how we manage ourselves. It's also about the importance of love injected into our community, and when people are in this entertainment industry, how we safeguard each other, how we have a conversation with someone and say, you know what, that person looks like they're struggling, that pressure you're putting on them isn't right. Or bro, sis, you don't seem yourself and you haven't seen yourself for a bit. What's going on for you? So I think having those kind of things, having that community, being able to identify when things are going wrong, feeling empowered enough to speak up, stepping in when things are wrong, I think is something that needs to change. And one thing I will say, and then I'm gonna pass the mic on, when we talk about racism, I mentioned earlier on misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, all of those kind of things. All of those systems of oppression have a negative impact on people's mental health. We all have a responsibility when we see that happening in society and happening to people, whether it's in the industry or not, to use your voice and speak up. It shouldn't be on the marginalized person to continually fight this fight. So if you are ally inside this room, if you are outside of a particular type of community and you don't identify as that community, if they're coming for one group of people, they're coming for you next, brother. So for me, as connected people, as human beings in this society, one of the major things that needs to change, two of the major things, is A, having an open conversation around mental health, not just rooted in depression and anxiety, but understanding things like psychosis, understanding things like schizophrenia. Let's expand this out so we all have a baseline understanding of what it is. And two, having a personal responsibility to step in, support, and love on the people that are within our community. So that for me is something that I think needs to change.
I love that. Thank you so much. Natasha, do you want to add a little bit on that as well?
Sure, yeah, I just think an interesting thing that came up when you were speaking there that I thought, yeah, that's absolutely right. I think there are acceptable mental illnesses. You know, there's a real understanding that we can mention depression and anxiety. And I think as a society we've got a certain amount of understanding for that type of mental health. But what's known as SMIs, severe mental illnesses, psychosis being one of them, there isn't that same understanding. And part of that is because there's not enough dialogue and training. You mentioned the music support training that just helps people to understand that's not just someone acting out, it's not entertaining, that's somebody who actually really needs help and support, and recognizing what SMIs are, I think is really important. And the media really plays into this negative narrative. So we can look at newspapers and the media in general and think we're much more understanding as a society now. You know, they're mentioning stress busters and let's be aware of depression and anxiety, but the same grace isn't offered to psychosis, to schizophrenia, to other types, more severe mental illnesses. And I think really educating is needed to be done so that we remove all stigma, you know, so it's not just, we don't just have acceptable mental illness, that we can talk about this one, we can tolerate this one, but we have real understanding to recognise it's supported, but also remove stigma around all types of mental illness.
Thank you so much. Can we make a round of applause for our amazing panelists? No, honestly, Vanessa, Housepoet, Franchesca, Richie, Natalie, Natasha, you guys have filled us with so much amazing tips, advice, your journeys. Like, honestly, it means so much. And I'm sure everyone has benefited so much into what you guys have said today, and just sharing your journey and what you guys have gone through, and just revolving around mental health, as this topic right here is very vital and it's very needed in the industry and doesn't get spoken about as much. So thank you so much. One more time, thank you. Now, I know a lot of people have a lot of questions. Y'all want to ask everything and anything, but because we're so short on time, guys, we're doing our Q&A, but we need just one question each for each person. Just a few questions. Has anyone got any questions that they want to ask?
Okay. Great discourse. Love the panel. And I just wanted to, my question was really around the social media conversation you guys were talking about. So I'm in the music industry, and when we're putting together like a project, right, the rollout plan must include social media, one way or the other. That is almost like the vehicle to making sure that your art gets heard. And I've heard a lot that you said. I mean, what one of you said today on the panel was what I tell my daughter as well, like, try not to, don't let social media rule your life. But at the same time, if you're in the music industry, you have to be so active on social media so that you can engage with the audience and they can consume that music, and on and on and on. Where do you strike that balance? Because ultimately, engagement is really what will push people to continue to stream your music. Yeah. Thanks.
Great question. Who is it for?
Yeah, I would say, because you're doing it with your daughter, incorporate her into the balance of your social media. So schedule it. Say Thursday between 12 and 2, I'm going to go on there and do all my social media, incorporating into my business and to where I want to go as an artist. So you have to balance the time. As much as we are artists, when you get that tick and you go, I've got to respond, I've got to go on there, hold back. Take your time and allocate it. Because if you don't allocate it, I do so many things freelance for radio stations, for people with support, mental health supporting, and one-to-one. And when you don't channel it and schedule it, mental health affects you. Because I'm a person that don't like to let down people. I don't like to let them down. I make sure that I'm there on time, I'm early, and I'm this. And without scheduling stuff, I would never be able to do it. And I would miss everyone's appointment. So schedule it and just say 1 hour out of the day, I'm going to focus this strictly on my promotion and how I'm going to progress within this music industry. And then when you do this, set all your posts and everything and schedule them, and put them out. And regardless of the likes, the this and that, because, you know, sometimes when we put things out, we expect to get 10 likes, 20 likes, and we don't get nothing. And we're quickly there to ready to delete a post and put something up that's going to get the likes because it's endorphins that are releasing. So be focused on your journey and what you're doing as an artist and whatever your business is, and then schedule 10 minutes to put that out and go with it. Yeah, believe in your journey, and your journey will get you to wherever you want to be. But you need to incorporate yourself. Like everyone's here today, their journey has been stumped somehow. And it's been stumped because they don't know where the next direction is going. So that's why everyone's here today, because they want to hear from mental health in the music industry, because mental health has been affecting them. And all these things have been affecting them. Social media has been affecting them. And they want to know, how do I get out of this situation? How do I progress past this path? So you need to believe in the journey. And regardless of the journey has changes. You know, a year ago I could hear. And then I had an operation to fix my hearing. And they made me permanently deaf. And I'm at the highest level of my career. And now I'm deaf. So all the people that I was working with, doing music, doing sound engineering, doing all these things with, has now come to, close. Or 50% of my bookings got taken away. Why did they get taken away? Because what, I'm deaf now and I can't hear, but I can still perform. You understand? So you have to take that stress and that mental health and that depression, the suicide, everything out of it. Because I've sat there, I've taken pills, I've lost my life, and then been in a hospital where they said, rah, tapping me. What, this guy's still alive? How is he still here? You know, through music. You understand? So music can take you to levels of destruction, can take you to levels of, am I supposed to be here? But what you need to understand in all of this journey is that your journey is not my journey. Your journey is your own journey. Okay? If you're going scheduling. So you need to schedule your life. Schedule your life. Schedule your journey and how you're going to obtain certain things. Yeah? Yeah, because, sorry.
There's an app called Panellists, so that's a great app for scheduling as well. So maybe try and use that. It's quite great for like entrepreneurs and artists, and it's actually great. And actually, like you said, it can minimize some of things that you're going through. Have you got a question? Yeah.
I'll keep it short. I just want to thank all the panelists here. My name is Michelle. I'm here with my husband, Chosan. We're both artists visiting from New York City. Well, he's from here. Thank you. And I'm just so happy to be here. I love London. I just love to hear the insight of everybody on the panel. And as artists in the industry, especially being in New York City, one thing that I haven't heard anyone mention is everyone's talked about mental health, but no one has talked about how to escape mental health, about drugs in the industry, gateway drugs and things like that, and just any advice. Not particularly struggling with that, but I've seen a lot. I've experienced a lot, and we all know that it's out there. So what are your thoughts on that? Because no one has spoken on that.
Sorry, before we get there, 1 second. I wasn't going to say nothing, but I'm going to keep it quick. Yo, this here, for everybody in this room, like no, how can I say this? Like, it's a real, and it is a blessing to be here. I grew up in London and then moved, by the way, just in case you're wondering. But I also work with people that do mental health. I'm in the fight to end homelessness. So I've got the mixture of the music and then where we are here. So these guys are talking some real stuff. Something that you said, Franchesca, that if I had heard years ago would have changed my life, is that there's a difference between you, the artist, and you. Do you understand? If I had heard that, I think that I would have not gone through as much dark things as I've done. Because artists are sensitive. No matter how they act and how many guns they carry and how many chains they got around their neck, they're sensitive. And when you can say that it's not that they don't like me, they don't like this piece of music. That's one of the biggest jewels. If you're here, please get that in your system. And that's it. One more thing. What you guys are talking about, this sounds like a real shameless plug, and it's not, I swear it isn't. On Friday, I have an album coming out called, and that's what I'm saying. No, listen, no, let's keep it real. Hakeem, what's up, man? That's my guy, Hakeem. So it's called, and listen, it ties in, I swear. If it doesn't, anyone can inbox me, I'll give you 50 pounds. It's called Me Against the Algorithm. It's talking about everything that you guys are talking about. And what's interesting, I'm sitting here like, yo, this is really what I was talking about. It's called, my name is Chozan, it's called Me Against the Algorithm. I got a song called Blue Check Fame. And it's the fact that people are, like, it's drugs. People are fiending for social media like it's crack. Do you understand? So Blue Check Fame as well. So, yeah, but let's talk, man. This is a great job. This is a blessing to be in this space, all right?
I can quickly touch on. I just got back from Glastonbury. Hey, big up. Yeah, I mean, woo, it was a lot. It was intense. And I'm glad that you brought up drugs because as a DJ, when you're in green rooms, especially in dance music, I was shocked because I came from a very different background. My dad told me if I ever take drugs, I'm going to be kicked out the door and disowned. So I've never, you know what I mean? That's not my background. So as soon as I started DJing, I was like, right, this is scary. Like, this is insane. Like, everyone, and it's so normalized. Like, and people are free to offer as if it's like sweets. But obviously, it could potentially, you could harm your life. Like, you might not wake up. Like, there's so many, like, people passed away at Glastonbury. So it's not a joke. And I think when you talked about like how to navigate that side of the industry, I think for me, the best thing has been to find communities and people who have the same mindset as me, and also find it crazy that there's so much drugs around, because it helps me feel like, you know, I'm normal for not wanting to take them, because I think the difficult thing for me was people being shocked that I didn't want to like engage in drug taking over the weekend, especially in Glastonbury. People are like, what? Vanessa, why don't you want to take a pill? And I'm like, I don't know, that's not really for me. And they're like, oh, like you're bringing the mood down, or like, oh, like, you know, like, yo, it's Glastonbury though, like you got to try it. And it's just, and that's when I was like, right, these are obviously not my people. And I need to find, I think someone said find your tribe, like online, but also find your tribe in real life, especially in this music game, because it's crazy. And I'm a person of faith. So I always say like all glory to God, and like let that guide me as well, because finding people of faith and finding people who have that mindset as well has helped me to like stay grounded, and also helped me to like stay away from that side, just because, and I would never judge anyone for taking drugs. In fact, I feel like we need to create safe spaces and protocols and procedures for people to understand like what they're taking. If you do want to engage in that, I would never shame people in doing that. But I also feel like there needs to be less, especially in dance music, we need to like destigmatize not taking them. We don't need to normalize it, but also we don't need to shame people for doing it. So it's like it's a tricky situation, but I think just find your community, find your tribe, and know that you're in the right space.
Thank you so much. Did you have a question? All right.
Oh, you can hold it. Hi, guys, honestly, such an amazing discussion, amazing. And also, a lot of love for just showing a lot of vulnerability, because that's not easy. My question, I can actually relate to quite a bit of what's been said. I lost someone quite close to me, and in the music industry, it's hard because there is a lot of pressure to be moving at a certain rate. And I found I was in a situation where I'm like, well, everyone around me is moving forwards, but I'm moving kind of backwards in a way, because I need to take this time to make sure my mental's okay, and I'm not getting into something where if I don't look after my mental health, I'm going to dig a big hole for me if I get really, really busy and the foundation is not clear. So I was wondering, if you had any advice on this whole situation, because the reason I wrote Solitude and had the lyric that time goes on with or without you is because one of the big things that I found out is when you go through something big, the world's still moving, you still got to pay your bills, everything's still going whilst your world's just been turned upside down. So what do you do? So if you have any advice on that, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, Richie.
Yeah, I'll keep it quite short, which is hard for me because I love to chat. That's why I got a talk show. I think the thing that I always have to remind myself, or had to remind myself through this process, is that short-term gain, long-term pain. So if I think, I've got to show up, and I'm thinking about the short term, what ends up affecting me is that I'm not dealing with what's in the now. So it might be fine now, and I can keep doing what I'm doing and do the shows that I need to do and show up where I need to show up. But long term, I'm going to crash. Right? So if I'm looking at my career, not just now in a week's time, a month's time, a year's time, I'm looking at it 10 years down the line. What do I need to process today to make sure I'm the best presenter or the best singer or the best artist that I can be in 10 years' time? So for me, it's that holistic. We speak about holistically, right? We are the spirit, we are the body, and we are the mind. And if one of them fails us, the rest collapse. So for me, it's understand, and like the way trauma can sharpen, like you're a singer, right? The way trauma can sharpen your voice box, if it's not managed properly, the way stress manifests inside your body, the way you're not sure whether it's stage fright or the anxiety that's related to what you've just experienced. And you get to a point where you're not able to differentiate between the two, right? They all mold into each other. So my advice is to stop, understand that you are a person, recognize your value, and know that you need to pour into yourself. So when we talk about, I spoke about your art being your baby, right? And parents need the best possible resources around them and need to be in the best health in order to look after their children. If your music's your baby and you're not where you need to be, understand it's going to affect your art. So for me, it's looking after you and looking after the spirit. Everyone thinks that stuff is soft and it's a bit new agey. I'm a bit of a care bear. But like for me, long term, it works for me, right? Like it's understanding that, if I want to be the best possible person I need to be, if my physical health is not right, I'm going to take care of that. If my mental health is not right, it's going to impact my physical health, and I'm not going to be able to show up in the way that I need to. I hope that helps a little bit.
That helps a lot. Thank you.
I think we have one more question.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for putting this event together. I think it's been really, really insightful and really great to hear all of your opinions, all of your thoughts. So my name's Vanessa as well, and I'm actually a qualified cognitive behavioural psychotherapist, and I'm here today with my friend Chin, who's also a CBT therapist. And we have been working in the mental health field for a while. We work with people who are experiencing depression, anxiety, psychosis, like you mentioned and you've described. And I'm so glad that we brought up the topic of severe mental health difficulties, because I absolutely believe that it's something that we are not speaking about enough within our community. But essentially, one of our passions, the passion that we share, as well as being therapists, is being creatives ourselves as well. So we are really, really passionate about the music industry itself, and we want to give back, we want to support, we want to do a bit more within the industry. So my question to the panelists here today is, what can we as therapists do to support you guys? What spaces can we create? What kind of support are you looking for? We want to pull back, we want to give back, so let us know that what we can do to help, and we can be at your service, basically. Thank you.
Natasha, are you good to give Natasha?
I feel like I can just say it because I'm here now, but anyway, thank you so much for saying that. And I wondered whether you've heard of the Music Industry Therapists Collective, because they will want to hear from you. They are a group of therapists that specifically, every one of them have worked in the music industry previously, not always as artists. Some have been promoters, some have been DJs, but they have lived experience of the creative industries, and they have a desire to give back, and from a point of view of understanding, but they're all qualified therapists, psychotherapists, and they did have only one person of color, and because I'm often described as a psychotherapist. Like I said, I'm not. I was approached by them, and actually I've done a lot of research work with them, but they are so keen, because the psychotherapists in Franchesca will do this. It's a very white space, right? And so if you are a person of color, it is really hard to find people that will understand you from that point of view, but also understand this weird and wonderful industry that we work in that's called music. So if I can speak to you afterwards, I would put you in touch with their director, because they are doing lots of work and they would really need your expertise, I think. All right.
I just want to add to that as well. So I come from a place where, me personally, with mental health and the straight factor of when anyone actually approaches a doctor or someone that speaks, the first thing that they're giving you is tablets. So yeah, I come from a place where I was given tablets, and the tablets didn't work in my body. I took tablets, I played. They said, this is the best thing that can help your mental health. Take these tablets, they're gonna make you feel great. They're gonna do all these things. And I took these tablets and I still played within the music industry. And I was playing at a really, really big event. And it was a corporate event, and everyone black ties and these kind of things. And we had a 3-course meal, and they served me grapefruit. So I ate this grapefruit, and what I didn't know is that grapefruit reacts with antidepressants, and then can cause you to have psychosis. So after this event, where I didn't drink, I just, I ate and I took these tablets. I ended up going back on the motorway, being dropped back to where I came from, and tried to jump out the car at about 100 miles an hour, out the car, took my seatbelt off, let me get out of this place. And that was all to do with antidepressants that are being described or being put on you anytime you deal with mental health issues. How I dealt with mental health was to do with speaking to people, family members, CBT therapy, and basically going online. And when we go back to social media, of going online and speaking to people and expressing how you are as a person and where your mental health is taking you. So I've had people back me, I've had friends disown me. I've had family disown me for saying, why are you speaking about these issues? And you're bringing this, disrespect to the family, because everyone now is talking about the family. But when you do these things and you don't speak about it, this burns inside, and it can cause a catastrophic effect. So what happens, all these things build up on you, and then when you're in a state of, where they say psychosis, everything explodes. And that's what happened to me. But from that day, I went to the doctors and I said, I'm never gonna take tablets again in my life.
I'm so sorry.
For 10 years, I've never taken tablets. I've never adjusted to taking antidepressants. And I believe in speaking about mental health, and I believe about speaking in this industry and how it takes you to where you need to be. So don't be afraid to speak to anyone. If you're going through anything, speak up and embrace everything that is here. And there's so many people there that can help you in this journey.
Thank you so much, Housepoet. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to everyone taking part in the Q&A as well and sharing your questions. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much once again to our panelists as well. I know a lot of you guys really enjoyed this topic. Like I said, it's very vital, it's very needed, and honestly, and massive congratulations on your, yes, I'm excited. So make sure you guys tune in. So I'm gonna hand it over to Farah G.